Been wanting to make my own beeswax finish and beeswax butter for cutting boards and stuff like that. And I'd heard the best way to do it was with a double boiler. Didn't have a double boiler, but I did have an old garage sale crock pot and had some wax, had an old pot, and bought some turpentine and linseed oil to make the finish, and bought some food grade mineral oil to make the cutting board butter. And here's how I went about it. As I said, I had this crock pot, and if you put just about 2.5 inches of water in it, with the displacement of the pot that went over it, it was just right to go right up the sides of the pot. Had an old IKEA pot that we quit using to be my inner shell for the double boiler. So got some wax from a friend who raises bees and broke that up. For the finish, I went with turpentine and boiled linseed oil, having heard that was a good recipe for finish. The idea of a finish, I hear, is that both the turpentine and the linseed oil will get hard. In some ways, the turpentine will flash off, will evaporate. The linseed oil will harden, and it will leave the wax behind then to be polished. Whereas the mixture with mineral oil, it keeps both ingredients in a food grade, so that you can use it on cutting boards, things that you'll be using around food. And the deal with the mineral oil is that it doesn't have dryers. It doesn't dry, so you basically rub it into the wood and let it sit a while and then rub off the excess. I was able to buy these 4-ounce tins on Amazon. They're super cheap. I think it came in a package of 45. They're screw lids. Once I had put the turpentine and the linseed oil in the pot and started to warm that up around the wax, it didn't take very long at all. All of this took place well below the boiling temperature of the water. The water never boiled, so it always felt, I would say, relatively safe. I just kept stirring the turpentine, linseed oil, and wax mixture until all the wax was melted and it was completely unified, and then just used a little measuring cup to basically dip that mixture out of the double boiler and into the tins. Very unscientific. I just filled them up to what looked like a almost full height to me. I think out of this batch, as far as weight, these measurements were by weight. These were equal parts, and I had a 13-ounce block of wax, so I also used 13 ounces of the boiled linseed oil and 13 ounces of turpentine. And that combined mixture, 13 times 3, 39 ounces of stuff, produced about 15 or 14 of these 4-ounce tins. So I just poured that off using the little measuring cup. It was a rather messy operation, but it wasn't bad. And I'll tell you also, the turpentine, because it's derived from a pine tree, made it has a great smell. The whole shop smelled great. And even the finished product, this beeswax finish, has a nice smell to it, kind of a piney smell. So once I'd poured those off, all there was left to do was to let them cool and let them harden, and that's what I did next. I just let this stuff sit, and it really was only a matter of a few hours that it started to kind of film over, and then maybe another hour later you could pick these tins up. They weren't hot to the touch. Again, I think the whole thing never got over about 160 degrees, maybe 170 degrees. Here they are, kind of hardened over. Here's just an idea of all the parts and pieces. An old pot, some 4-inch tins, an old crock pot, an old measuring cup, and that's really about it. Then I had some Avery labels. I just made myself a beeswax finish label and stuck it to the lids, so when it was time for me to make my cutting board butter using the mineral oil, I would remember which was which with regard to the tins and what was inside. Again, this wax that I used for this project was yellow wax. I have white wax that I'm going to use later for the cutting board project, the cutting board butter project. I think the main difference between white wax and yellow wax is, I've heard at least, is the age of the bees that create it, and I think what the bees are eating, or what the pollen is that is part of it. I've also heard that the yellow wax tends to have a little bit more of a pleasant odor, and I sure find that to be the case with this finish. It smells great. I think it does perhaps add a little bit of ambering color to a light colored wood. I'll show you here in a minute. I used it on a piece of beech, which is a very light wood, and it does amber it out just a little bit, which I happen to like. It doesn't look bad at all to me. I think, like most paste wax finishes, you rub this stuff on, rub it into the grain. I usually use a piece of steel wool, a fine, like a 3/0 steel wool, and buff it, rub it into the grain, and then kind of buff it into the grain, so you're getting kind of a light sanding out of the steel wool, but you're also working the oil and the wax deeply into the grain. So the combination of those two, once it comes time to buff off the surface, you end up with a very, very, very smooth surface. So here I'm just trying it out on a piece of beech. This isn't really the greatest test of all tests, but I just wanted to see how it worked compared to other paste waxes I have. I've got Minwax paste wax. I've got SC Johnson paste wax. I would say this works similarly. It goes on really easy because it's just the right consistency, kind of like about a Vaseline consistency. So it rubs on, it rubs in very well. And again, if you use steel wool, you can kind of sand it into the surface, so to speak. And then once you let that sit a while, again, I think the science behind it is you're letting the turpentine flash off, and you're letting the linseed oil soak into the wood, and then you give it a very brisk buffing, and it's not like you get a shiny gloss mirror kind of a finish, but you get a super slick finish that feels good to your hand. It's added some protection to the wood, and it just gives you the, I think, the impression of a finely made piece of woodwork, because the finish is so smooth to the touch and has just the right amount of sheen. Thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this video. If so, please subscribe. Thanks again.